Right, hi guys, it's Bob from Greybeard Models. Welcome back to the channel. It's been a while. Why has it been a while? Well, you know what I'm like when the weather's nice over here in the UK. We've had some pretty good weather. I know we've had some pretty crappy rain, but it's one of the things in the UK, we don't get the extremes. We don't get the real bad stuff that you guys get out there in the big wide world. We don't get huge forest fires. We don't get volcanoes. We don't get tornadoes and shit like that. That you guys go through. I look at the news sometimes and I think, crikey, we are so lucky here. We don't have the extremes that you guys have to put up with. Our weather's normally sort of more or less in the middle. It's not too rough and it's not too cold and it's not too hot. But anyway, that's enough of me prattling on about that. Well, as you know, when the weather gets to the summer, when it's the summer here, that could be anything over 20 degrees Celsius. I like to get out and about and I go for walks and I wander off into the sort of countryside, which is great. Love doing that. But I've also, I've also got other things that I do. If you've been watching the channel, you'll know. So I go off and watch my cricket, and I'll go off and have a few beers with some friends in the pub, that sort of thing. And one of the things I do like is like reading books, and I read a hell of a lot of books. And one of the other sort of hobbies that I've had over the years is researching my family history, and I've got a website that has my family tree on it. In fact, what I'll do is I'll put a link below. So I go off and I wander off and I go and do all these other sort of things, and sometimes there's periods where I don't sit at the bench. I can't sit at the bench, it's too hot and it's not I'm not in the right frame of mind for it. People mention about losing their mojo and all that sort of stuff. I get that as well. But I've also been doing a little bit. I've been making some progress on the Confederate gun carriage and cannon, and that's come along. So there's a bit of footage about that, and which was in the last video. I've made progress with the limber and the cannon. But I've also now been starting to work on the harnesses. So I've got some footage of that, which I'll show you in a bit, and some of the things that I've been reading. I've got a stack of books here, so I'll show you some of the books I've been reading. So a bit interesting, a bit of a wandering off on the meander of life, if you like. But anyway, enough of this old waffle. Let's get over to the bench and see what we're about. Okay, so I've got a couple of books to show you that I've got. One is this one, Plymouth in the Great War. My mother's side of the family tree were from Plymouth generally, and this is just before the Great War, and it's all about when they started to recruit people and all of that sort of thing. So this is a great book for me, as where I've been sort of tracing the family tree, and that sort of thing. So that was the first book that I managed to pick up. Great read that is. The next one that I picked up is this one, RAF Bomber Command at War from 39 to 45 by Craig Armstrong. Really good book. Got some really good photographs in there, some really good stuff, some information, pictures of various crews and all that sort of stuff, and lots of information. So really useful book if you're interested in Bomber Command, and especially things like the Lancaster. The other book that I picked up was this one, On the Road to Victory, The Rise of Motor Transport with the British Expeditionary Force in the Western Front. This is World War II
World War One, by Michael Harrison. Really good stuff. Got some great pictures from the First World War and some great information about the designs of vehicles and how they managed to get a hold of drivers and vehicles and how the vehicles developed and all of that sort of stuff. Really good book. So I've got that, had a good read of that. Next one that I picked up was this book, Tank Warfare 1939-45 by Simon and Jonathan Forty. This covers both sides of the war in terms of the Axis side and the Allies, and shows all sorts of tank tactics and stuff like that. Again, really interesting pictures and information about various stages of the war and you know, the various incidents and things that are important for, you know, tank tactics and things. But again, really good read. And finally, this one that I got, those of you that know my brother's channel, he lives in Norfolk, he lives in Norwich, and this is all about defending Norfolk and a military landscape from prehistory to the present by Mike Osborne. This is again a really interesting book. It gives you all sorts of pictures of pillboxes and the various defences out there in the landscape from prehistory right up to the present day. But it also tells you where these things are. So if you're interested in going up there and finding them, you can find the various castles and things like the buildings that are still there that formed part of the defence and all of that sort of stuff. So again, really interesting book. So that's what I did. And in the meantime, I have been doing some other stuff. So I'll just get over to sorting out my bench and get some stuff there. And we'll get on with that. So right, the first thing to do in constructing the harnesses was to actually have a look at these, have a look at the drawings in the instructions. I'll just move these up a bit so they're in, and they describe how the harness parts go together. And also on the next page, if I've got it right, no, not that page, this page, it gives you a written rundown of what part goes where, and also gives you a close-up of the harness, oh sorry, the bridle parts, that sort of thing. So having established what I need to make, which is essentially these, I got the parts from the Stagecoach kit. Now the Stagecoach kit, all of the bridle and the harnesses are exactly the same as this, and I have a complete set in the Stagecoach. So first thing to determine is, right, what are we going to make, and what do we, you know, what can we keep? Well, in the Stagecoach, the harness parts, as I say, are exactly the same as with the gun carriage. It also includes saddles. Now for the Stagecoach, you don't need the saddles, so that's really handy, because I can use the saddle parts, and the details are in here, to put together to make the saddle for the rider on the gun troop. So that's really good news. It means I don't have, it's parts I don't have to make. Essentially it's this part here, and there's another part that's actually fallen off the sprue, which is that part. So you know, and there's a couple of other bits and pieces. As you can see, there's stirrups are there, so I might have to make up the straps for the stirrups, but I'm not sure yet. So first thing I did, or the first part to get, I thought, well, have a look here, there's two of number one. So this is the front harness set, this is the rear harness set. So I'm going to need, given there's 4 horses, I'm going to need 8 of number 1. So what I've done to get underway is found number one. This is part number one, and it's exactly the same part. And then the next thing to do was to make a template out of this. So I chose a piece of 30 thou card, just to make a rough template so that I could get the right sizes marked out on, you know, on a 60 thou piece of card. Having measured the thickness of this, it's 60 thou. So I needed a simple template. So that's pretty much a template of that. So the next stage is to get the 60 thou card, mark it all out, and cut out the pieces. So I'll get away and do that, and I'll come back to you. So having traced around the template, I've now marked out 8 pieces here. So now I've got the rather long and laborious task of cutting all of these out and shaping them and everything else. So then that's essentially the principle that I'm going to use to replace the parts that are missing. So I'll get ahead and do these, and then I'll come back to you. Right, so okay, so having the original part and making the template, now I've got a whole selection of 60 thou card marked out, ready for cutting. And then what I've done is, this is the first copy. So again, cutting the shape and then getting the rings onto it so that we've got a pretty close approximation of the moulded part. Still needs a little bit of fettling, a little bit more rounding of the edges, a little bit more sanding just to get it absolutely perfect, but that's the start. So now, having cut all of these parts out and sort of proven the process that I can go through, all I've got to do now is continue and carry on cutting these. So I'll get on and do that, and then we'll have a little bit more progress on the second part, which is which I think are these parts here. Just check them. They've got, fortunately, got the numbers moulded on the back. Is it number 2 I'm looking for? Right, yeah. So there's a 2 left and a 2 right. So these will be the next parts that we'll make, and we'll probably, over here as well, there's a 2 left. Over here there's a 2 left and a 2 right. So what we'll probably do with these is actually make them and fit them almost directly to the horses. So what we'll do is we'll sort of create the shapes, put them onto the horses, and then they'll have to be painted in situ, because keeping copies of that will be a bit difficult, I think. So anyway, so bits of progress, and do a bit more, and I'll come back to you later.
Right, okay, so if you've been following that, you'll see how I'm making those parts for the gun carriage harnesses. I've moved on to some of the other parts as well and looked at developing how I can make those, but I'm waiting for some materials to turn up, and it's going to take a bit more time than I expected it to do. Excuse me. The harnesses aren't difficult, they're time consuming. I looked at different ways of doing them. I looked at maybe moulding them, and you know, making silicon molds and doing that sort of thing. Two things: expensive materials, and I don't know if it would work. I'm more confident crafting the parts than actually doing all the molding processes. It's many years since I did that, so it's yeah, it's a bit of a risk, that. So what I've decided to do is the gun carriage project will carry on. It'll be in the background. As I do more work on it, I'll give you updates. But in terms of going on and, you know, weekly giving you updates, maybe that won't happen. But I want to, because I want to move on and do some other models. I've got about, I think I've worked it out, about 120, 140 something odd kits in the stash, and I want to get on with some other projects before I get too old. But thanks for watching, thanks for bearing with it, and we'll be back with some updates on the gun carriage shortly. In the meantime, I'm going to go on to some of the other projects. So thanks for watching, thanks for sticking with me and listening to all this drivel. Bye for now.